Welcome, witches, wizards, and muggles alike, to another enchanting episode of Magical Tales from the Slytherin Common Room, bringing your favorite Harry Potter fanfiction to audio format. So sit back, relax, and lock your headphones and let the magic begin.
Apostasy by Deydralinne, Chapter 46. Ronald waited until the foreign minister left before turning to them, his mood suddenly serious. Apologies, I did not call you here to meet Nikolai. We have found the people you were looking for. Ginevra's brother and the Order Fellow. Ronald held out a slip of paper toward her. Scrawled on it was an address. Hermione turned to Ginny in shock, her heart now pounding. They found Kingsley and Ron. A hot flush washed over her as she read the address. It was here in France. They were in fucking France. My guy tells me there were 2 Weasley boys there. One of them is missing an ear. George, Hermione and Ginny whispered at the same time. Well, that made things immediately more complicated. They had come to an agreement on how to handle Ronald, but they had not yet discussed what would happen should they cross paths with the others. Thank you, Ren. This means a lot, Hermione spoke softly. Ren nodded and chewed his tongue momentarily. Give them hell, he said, concluding their conversation. The group didn't speak on their way home. Tension was thick in the air around them. Draco seemed especially broody while Blaise kept throwing Ginny nervous looks and stroking her hand. Ginny made her way straight to the bar as soon as they landed, pouring everyone drinks and throwing herself on the couch. All right, so are we just turning up or what? Knock on the door. Bang, a body him on the doorstep like James Potter in 1981? Hermione snorted into her drink. Merlin, Jen. Jenny shrugged. Well, I'm not wrong, am I? But is that the plan? That's what we're doing? She asked as she looked between them all. I don't know, but what are we going to do about George? Hermione asked the redhead. What about him? She shrugged casually and nonchalantly. Well, I know what your stance on killing Ron is, but what's the stance on George? Hermione elaborated. It was easy to feel nothing towards Ron's death. He had earned it, pushed them to their limits, and committed too few many acts of betrayal against them. But George had not. He had left earlier on in the war, moving at Kingsley's request to a safe house overseas to help them. At the time, Hermione didn't think much of it, but perhaps now that she thought about it, it had been intentional. Ginny thought about it for a second. The same internal conflict that Hermione had was clearly one that Ginny felt too. George had been there when Hermione had started using the killing curse, but he was gone before she had reached her peak. He only saw the side of her that was still hurt by the choice to utilize it, and was even more devastated by her teammates' reaction to it. I suppose that depends on whether or not he intends to stand in our way. Well, that's up to you. He's your brother, Jen. Hermione wouldn't do anything that she wasn't comfortable with. She also didn't know if she had it in her to kill George. And your ex-boyfriend, Draco grumbled bitterly under his breath. Hermione turned to him slowly and raised an eyebrow. Jealous, are we? I'll have you know that George and I never dated. We just slept together from time to time. Blaise and Ginny looked on with amusement, quietly sharing looks with each other. Oh yeah, that's supposed to make me feel better, is it? Draco drawled sarcastically. Hermione rolled her eyes and groaned. I don't know what's going to make you feel better, but it's a non-factor for me. It's not as if you haven't slept with other women before me. She retaliated. Neither you nor I have the risk of running into any of them ever, Draco glared at her. His mood over it was actually so ridiculous it was funny. Oh my god, it's not like there was much risk I was going to run into him, Draco. It's not exactly something I can control. What do you want me to do about it? Not go? 'Cause that's not happening. What do you think I'm going to do exactly? See him and decide to just jump on his dick? Hermione exclaimed in frustration. I don't want you to do anything, but I'm allowed to be annoyed by the fact that he has. Please don't finish that sentence, Ginny interrupted, for everyone's sake, but especially mine. Fine, Draco concluded, drinking down his whiskey and stalking from the room. I can't imagine George just standing aside and letting us take them, knowing they are going to die, Hermione theorized. Blaise raised his eyebrows in agreement. So then he dies? Hermione looked at Ginny with uncertainty. Something about that didn't feel right. She was the first to slice down anyone, and she never cared, but somehow George felt wrong. I don't think he's a threat. Even if we took Ron, he wouldn't come after us, I don't think. Ginny sighed, obviously feeling the same way. I guess we just see how it goes. The address was on a Fidelis charm, so we don't have to worry about wards going off at least, Hermione noted. Issues with George aside, one thing was for certain. Kingsley and Ron could not get away. They would die painfully and imminently. Where's Theo? Back at the hospital? We should probably take him and Pansy in case, right? Ginny looked between them. An uncomfortable silence fell between them while everyone sipped their drinks and stared at nothing. I was summoned, Theo joked, flouncing into the room in his Death Eater robes and gumboots. He went straight to the bar. Unlike the others, though, he did not pour himself a drink. Instead, he retrieved a can of Red Bull from the fridge, cracked it, and did not break eye contact with her as he slowly gulped the entire thing down. Fucking hell, not the bloody Red Bulls again, Draco groaned as he re-entered the sitting room, now dressed for a raid. Hermione's eyes trailed the way that his black shirt and vest clung to his frame. The way his eyes, ice-cold gray, shone from underneath his mask. Even his pants clung to him and showed off just how solid his thighs were. Heat flamed in her abdomen. Oh, she would definitely have to explore that later. Draco felt her eyes on him and shifted to look at her in curious surprise. He slipped into her mind and she let him in. Fantasies of him fucking her in his ensemble floating around them. He scoffed a laugh and slipped from her mind again. His mood from before had dropped, and he noticeably turned to look out the sitting room windows into the bush beyond. We're just waiting for... Here, I'm here, Pansy sang as she swished into the room. Right then, Hermione pulled the parchment from her pocket and handed it to the group. Blaise looked at it and pressed a kiss to Ginny's head before going to change. Hermione and Ginny shared a look and mutually decided that they would not be donning their robes today. They wanted no anonymity about it. The order had been a thorn in her side for years now, and if she's going to achieve her goals, then she needed them to stop trying to disrupt her at every turn. Theo cracked another drink that echoed through the silence. Merlin, Theo, are you trying to give yourself a heart attack? Ginny squeaked. Hey, I have to be on the ball. I have a title to maintain, Red. Theo winked and started stretching out his arms and shoulders. Hermione huffed a laugh. It's hardly a title. Ginny gave her a teasing smirk. Aw, my, are you feeling threatened? Gave her best friend a withering look. No, I can't be threatened by something he barely has. Big words for someone who was losing. Theo grinned. Hermione flipped him off, but a smile still pulled at her lips. It was good to see Theo smile again. She had really missed it while Astoria had been on the brink of death. He had a way of making every situation seem lighter. Draco pulled her back against his chest and kissed her shoulder. It's okay, baby. He won't be gloating for long. Sickening, Pansy mocked as Blaise strolled into the doorway, who gave Hermione a wink of support. Hermione leaned her head back against Draco's chest and felt the comforting thrum of his heartbeat. Excuse me, you all wanted to play matchmaker and place bets. You can all suck it. Is everyone ready? The address was a small farm estate. When they landed on a small hill out back of the main house, which was covered in a vegetable garden. George was crouched in the dirt not 3 meters from them, plucking beans. He looked up in surprise at their sudden appearance, his brow creasing slightly as he took in Ginny and Hermione first, and then their companions. No one moved for a second, waiting to see who would make the first move, to see if he would sound the alarm. George sighed, put the beans into the basket, and stood dusting himself off. Ron and Kingsley told me you had turned. I didn't want to believe it. Their housemates didn't move, following hers and Ginny's leads. Did they tell you we want to put an end to that war as well? Hermione queried with a raised eyebrow. Or just that we are horrible people? George eyed her passively, his eyes drifting across the Death Eaters, then back to Ginny. His hand made no movement to draw his wand. What are you doing, kiddo? Are you really going to go through with this? He asked in resignation. With killing them? Ginny asked, shifting from one leg and folding her arms. Hermione eyed the house at the bottom of the hill. There were no signs of movement within, no faces peering out in horror or hiding behind the curtains. Absolutely. Ginny's affirmation visibly wounded him. He is our brother, Ginny, George pleaded. He stood by while I was raped, George, Ginny snarled back. Her older brother recoiled and paled. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the day they tried to kill Hermione and kidnapped me. Ron, your brother, put me in a body-binding hex and silenced me. He put me on the bed, sent Harry in, and locked the door behind him. Harry proceeded to rape me while Ron stood guard downstairs. Ginny spat, her rage evident. He didn't tell me, George mumbled. Ginny scoffed. I wouldn't expect him to. What about you, Hermione? George's eyes drifted back to her, a sad familiarity within his eyes tugged at her heartstrings. George never wanted any of this. He had already lost his twin and both his parents, and here he would be forced to choose between his sister and his brother. What about me? Hermione shrugged. They didn't have time for this. Any second now someone could look outside and see them. Ron and Kingsley could flee, and they would once again be back at square one. Her eyes drifted nervously back to the house again. Why are you doing this? George asked, following her eyes toward the house, and he sighed. They're asleep. Hermione looked at him, really looked at him. He looked tired. Not tired in the battle-hard kind of way that she and Ginny had become, but tired in the same way she had seen Harry become. She doubted that they got news of the outside world here, not if it was under a Fidelis. If he had been here the last 5 years, then he probably felt pretty out of touch and torn. Because it's the right thing to do. George laughed incredulously. Murder is the right thing to do? Hermione sighed, looking up at the sky. Ending the war, George, and yes, that means ending their lives. You don't know what's been going on. Then explain it to me, he pleaded with her. Hermione shook her head. We don't have time. Perhaps if we all make it out the other side of the war, then there might be a chance for a conversation. George's eyes turned distant and his face closed off. Then I can't let you pass. You would be asking me to let my brother die, and I've already lost enough family members to this damn war. Hey, Weasley, catch. Draco tossed something small and yellow at the Weasley male, who had been removed from the war enough to catch the object on instinct. He turned the rubber duck over in his hand, peering at it in confusion. His eyes flicked back up to them for only a moment before he was pulled through the navel and away from the estate. Portkey. He will land in New Zealand somewhere. I figured it will take him a while to find his way back here, and this way, no one is guilty of anything. He didn't let you through, and you two didn't need to kill him. Win-win. Hermione reached up and kissed him softly. Thank you, she whispered. Her reaction seemed to hurt him, and he just nodded absently. But she didn't have time to explain that it wasn't because of residual feelings for George that she was thankful. It was because that he had saved Ginny from losing 2 brothers today instead of 1. They had a job to do, and that conversation would have to wait. The house was quiet as they crept through it. Pansy and Theo had chosen to scope the downstairs area while Blaise and Draco took the 2nd floor, and Ginny and Hermione took the 3rd. The hallway that opened up from the top of the stairs was just one long corridor with approximately half a dozen doors that were all shut, leading off of it. Hermione motioned to the first door and they crept forward, opening it and peering inside. It was a bedroom, which appeared lived in, but was empty. The door opposite revealed a man about her age who quickly fired a hex her way the second he saw them. He was dead before his hex even landed. 1, Hermione whispered, closing the door behind them and moving along the hallway. The next door led to a bathroom, also empty, while the next room raised Hermione's count up to 3 with a single slicing hex that cut the throats of both occupants in one swoop of her wand. Nice, Ginny whispered as she silenced the falls of the bodies. Thanks, Hermione whispered back before quietly opening the next door. Inside was Kingsley, asleep on top of his covers, one arm draped over his eyes. Hermione motioned for Ginny to cover her as she crept into the room, coming to a stop next to the man who had caused so many deaths. She pointed the tip of her wand, which thrummed with excitement, to the underside of his chin, and he startled awake. Peering up at her with wide eyes. "Morning," Hermione chirped with a smile. Elation couldn't begin to describe the feeling she felt as she watched him swallow deeply and pat the mattress slowly beside him for his wand. "Ah, ah, ah," Hermione tutted. Hermione bent down and whispered in his face, "Check, mate." That was all there was to say before she put him in a body-binding curse and knocked him unconscious. Just to be safe, she retrieved his wand and snapped it, throwing the discarded pieces on his chest. "Come on, let's check the other rooms," Hermione whispered, leaving him stuck to the bed. The next room Ginny busted into interrupted one couple in the throes of passion, both dead before they could uncouple. "Gross," Ginny grumbled. Unfortunately, the remaining rooms turned up empty, one of which had clearly been George's room, based on the familiar old Weasley jumper discarded at the end of his bed and a few photos he had of the days at the Burrow pinned to the wall. "Come on, let's get that old fucker downstairs before he manages to escape again," Hermione said, slowly pulling George's door shut. Theo and Pansy were lounging about on the order sofas when they returned, but straightened up at the sight of her levitating Kingsley. 5. Theo sighed. 1. This place is boring. There's no one here, he pouted. Hermione eyed his foot that wouldn't stop tapping. "Well, not no one," Pansy said, indicating to the stairwell that Ginny and Hermione had just come from. They turned to see Blaise levitating a beaten and bloodied Ronald Weasley. "Bingo," Hermione grinned.